Thank you for joining us today. This webinar has been brought to you by TriggerHub. For those of you who aren't aware, TriggerHub offers the most advanced solution for mental health recovery, support and wellbeing. And by using lived experience and bibliotherapy, we're able to reach more people, engage them earlier, and provide tried and tested strategies that offer hope and compassion and unlock the secrets of successful recovery. If you want to know a bit more about TriggerHub, you can scan the QR code that's about to pop up on your screen and then follow us online in there. Just while you're all doing that, there's probably a few little things to run through before we get going. And to keep things simple and less distracting, we recommend using speaker view. Everyone is muted by default and you can't unmute yourself. However, the chat is enabled, so if you want to say hi and where you're from, you can do now. If you have any specific questions you want answered, please use the Q&A feature and then upvote any popular questions that you see. And we'll try to answer as many questions as possible at the end. And the answers to all the questions, including those not discussed during the event, will be emailed out to you later in the week. If anyone's having any technical problems, please drop us a message in the chat and a member of the TriggerHub team will be on hand to help you out. The webinar this morning is going to run for about 45 minutes and we will be recording the event today, so a copy of the recording will be made available to those who can't attend, and TriggerHub may use the video for marketing purposes as well. At the end of the webinar there's going to be a short online survey. If everyone could just take a minute to complete it, because the feedback we receive from these events, it really shapes what we do in the future, and so your input ensures that these sessions remain valuable to both yourself and students at your university. I should also mention that some of the topics we'll discuss can be difficult, even if we don't expect them to be, so it's fine to take a break if you need to in there. And if we just give it a minute, I think we're just waiting for a few more people to join and then we'll crack on. And my screen didn't start sharing, but there's the QR code if everyone wants to scan it and follow TriggerHub. Right, I think that's everybody in. And so the aim of this webinar today is to discuss practical strategies that make mental health more visible on campus in that, and how we can use that as a way to create opportunities for conversations outside the therapy room. And we have two amazing speakers with us today. The first is Ben Aldridge. Ben's an author and a speaker who talks passionately about practical philosophy, comfort zones, mental health and adventure. I'll let Ben tell you a bit more about his journey, but it's fair to say he's someone who's embraced the idea of leaving his comfort zone and has developed tried and tested strategies to help other people build a resilient mindset. And the other speaker really needs no introduction. Dr. Dominique Thompson is an award-winning GP with over 20 years of clinical experience, including as a police and expedition doctor and director of services at the University of Bristol. Student health services. And she's also an author and a TEDx speaker and rightly regarded as a leading expert on student welfare. And as for myself, I'm the host, I'm Stuart, and the sales and marketing manager at TriggerHub. And I'm dedicated to giving mental health a voice and enabling people to change their lives through lived experience and bibliotherapy. I should probably also explain why I'm dressed like a monkey. So running alongside this webinar, this week we have a week of challenges planned that are taken out of Ben's books. And they're designed to encourage people to leave their comfort zone and try new things. And today's challenge was to dress outrageously. So here I am in my monkey's onesie. I've got to admit, I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable at the moment right now, hence my slightly croaky voice. But that was kind of the point of the challenge in there. And I am going to take my hood down though, because it's like 1,000 degrees in there. But I think, first of all, Ben, it'd be really good if you could tell us a bit about your own journey with anxiety and mental health and how that affected you.
Yes, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So my name's Ben Aldridge. I'm a writer and speaker. And I tend to focus on my journey with mental health and how stoicism and philosophy kind of helped me when I was in a very dark space. So to give you a little background as to how I became a writer and a speaker, what happened is I began having panic attacks, and they came out of the blue and I didn't know what they were. And because these were so physical, it was incredibly frightening. And I think the lack of education around panic and anxiety, I just instantly thought that there was something physically wrong with me. I didn't understand what was happening. And it was terrifying. And they started just building up, and it was this back-to-back panic attack experience. And there was no clear trigger. It wasn't off the back of trauma or anything particularly frightening. It just hit me out of the blue. And I think that's what was so disarming about it, and what I found challenging. And to cut a long story short, the way that I dealt with this, I went to the doctor, who instantly recognized this as anxiety. And I kind of rejected that diagnosis because I didn't think that my mind could be so powerful and could create such physical sensations within my body. So what happened was I went home and I started reading as much as I could, and quite quickly came to the conclusion that she was spot on, and she'd got the diagnosis absolutely right. And from that point, I just started reading as much as I could, got into philosophy and psychology and self-help and all these different things. But I really connected to Stoicism. And I kind of credit this philosophy, this ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, as the reason I was able to turn my life around. And one idea in particular that really resonated with me was the idea of voluntary discomfort, which the Stoics used to do. They were fantastic. They had these weird and wonderful things they used to do. They would deliberately sleep on hard surfaces. They would expose themselves to the cold and the heat and fast from food and water, and they would embarrass themselves in front of their peers so they could practice overcoming shame, and they would engage in physical activity. They would do all of these wonderful things. And I decided that I would start to emulate this. So I began trying to push myself out of my comfort zone. And I started very, very, my first challenge was very small. It was literally to walk to the bench in my local park, which was about 200 meters away. So that should give you a sense of what kind of mental space I was in. But then slowly over time, I gained confidence. Every time I did a little challenge, I started to believe in myself again. And these challenges got bolder. I mean, they started off the bench and then catching the tube and then driving on the motorway, very small things, but my confidence started to come back. And then I started to do bolder, braver things, very much emulating the Stoics by sleeping on the floor and having cold showers and ice baths. And then it got more adventurous, and I started doing kind of wild things, mountaineering and running marathons, ice swimming, and learning loads of different skills and all these different things that have completely changed my relationship with that anxiety. And this has kind of turned into my writing. So my first book was about my journey with anxiety and then the challenges that I completed to help me deal with that. My second project was a deck of challenge cards to help people look at different ways they can step outside of their comfort zones and connect to this concept. And then my most recent book is about Stoicism in more detail, because it's a beautiful philosophy that's very practical and can help us in many different ways. So that's really where I came from, and that's kind of my journey and what I've created. And it's been a really interesting experience. I've learned so much about myself, and I'm really connected to some wonderful ideas that I believe can help many people to build resilience and learn a lot about themselves and have fun in the process.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks for that, Ben. Out of interest, how do people normally react when you talk to them about Stoicism and mental health? Obviously, for a lot of people, this will be a new concept.
I think with the Stoics, people really enjoy how practical this philosophy is. It's not just about thought experiments and academic texts. It's very engaging. And the Stoics used to do lots of things that we can do. We can test these ideas out. And I think that's what gets some great reactions. And I think people can instantly start using this philosophy. And that's what's so helpful. I think it's a wonderfully pragmatic tool. And there's lots of different things, lots of different areas that you can explore within the philosophy.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really interesting. And I think this webinar was obviously inspired by your books and the content in them, and like Stoicism, Buddhism, CBT. psychology and to, like you say, encourage people to face their fears, embrace adversity, and leave their comfort zone. We've kind of got that one, let's have a venture on one hand, and then on the other, I was reading a blog post recently on the Higher Education Policy Institute website that described the current generation of students as the most anxious we've ever had. And then I guess this is probably more of a question for Dom, but what's driving such high levels of anxiety in the student population?
Thank you, Stuart. I mean, it is really interesting when we look at so many different studies and polls and research that are coming out, certainly in the last year or two, looking at sky high levels of anxiety in students. And it doesn't really matter whether, you look at the one from the HEPI one, which was done with advanced HE as well, or whether you look at Together All. I mean, lots and lots of people are looking at this and seeing skyrocketing anxiety. And it's not just the pandemic. I think we are all aware that that has had a major impact on the entire younger generation. But it feels like there's sort of two levels here. A lot of young people, and students in particular, worry on a more personal level, just that they're not good enough at lots of different things and in lots of different ways. So there's this whole thing about not being good enough, failing, not wanting to let people down, lots of ways of looking at that, but there's the sort of personal level of anxiety. And then I think there's this more, I call it global level of anxiety about all the stuff that's happening in the world. So obviously the pandemic played a role in that. We might say recession, we might talk about things to do with politics, eco worries, and then of course things like racism and sexual harassment. So I think, we've got this, well, I don't like the term perfect storm, but it does feel like there's an awful lot going on, and that there are good reasons why, as a generation, we're seeing some very anxious students. It's not to say that all of them are. Some of them have taken on the challenges and are, just dealing with it the best they can and cracking on. But what we're seeing play out is a high level of anxiety at the moment.
Yeah, so with having such high levels of anxiety, why is it so important that students learn how to manage their negative emotions?
So it can feel very safe when you feel anxious to just stick with what you know, to avoid risk, to not want to make things worse, and I mean, as humans, none of us like the unknown, like not knowing what's going to happen next is a naturally anxious state for humans, apart from a few like real, on the edge of life risk takers. Most people, when we feel anxiety, there's a bit of our brain that just goes, hang on a minute, I don't like this is uncomfortable. And we try and, recreate a sort of safe environment for ourselves by keeping everything the same. So what can be helpful when we are managing an uncertain world, as it is, or it feels like it at the moment, is, to challenge that a little bit. And it can be, doing that gently. And we're taught more, because obviously Ben's the expert here, about how we can do challenges and what we can do. But I think what's really important is for students and those of us who work with them to understand that it isn't just that the anxiety side of things will benefit. They'll get other benefits from doing this when they challenge themselves or they try new things, which is how I frame it when I give my talks. I always talk about doing 3 things for well-being: building your support network, so the people around you, trying new things, and finding a daily purpose. When we do that, we build up other skills as well. We maybe start to think about creative thinking, we might start to think about our planning skills. There are other things, life skills, that will come off the back of, doing new things. So I think it isn't just about testing ourselves and dealing with the anxiety, but thinking about how else we can look after ourselves when we're doing this.
Yeah, that's a really good answer to the question. I think for Ben, why do you think the challenges are so effective in helping people?
I think because you're taking control of the situation in a way. You're pushing yourself, you're kind of doing something proactive. And to mirror what Dom says, you don't need to, it doesn't really matter what mental space you're in, because you're always going to benefit from the concept of stepping outside of your comfort zone, because everyone has different types of comfort zone. And you might be a confident public speaker, but you might be terrified of flying, or vice versa. There's many different combinations. Everyone is different. So I think there's so much growth that we can experience when we work through things that challenge us and things that we're afraid of. And I think that can just be wonderful for many different reasons: building resilience, learning more about who we are, and also having adventure and bringing color and challenge and novelty into our lives. And I think this can help us to think differently and help us to grow in many different ways. So I think the practical element of it, it feels empowering, and I think it helps build confidence, but not the kind of surface confidence, but like a true inner confidence, knowing that you are able to handle different situations because you've done loads of different things and you're building your confidence slowly. It doesn't have to start with jumping out of a plane. It can start very, very small little challenge. And that's really what I think we've been trying to build here with some of the challenges that we encourage people to test out.
And if I can just add to that, I completely agree with everything Ben said, but it is about the fact that, life is uncertain. And we need to be able to tolerate that kind of uncertainty, that ambiguity, the fact that we know from the pandemic, obviously, that massively difficult things can happen, but also little everyday things can happen that are stressful and that are part of life. And it might be, that they're obviously dealing with academic stress and unpredictable things, but it might be, they'll move on and maybe they'll be trying to, rent a flat and that will fall through, or, they'll be trying to, find the right gift for somebody and they won't succeed. And it's not about failure. It's about the fact that life is bumpy. And all of these skills, everything that we're talking about, isn't just about dealing with anxiety. It's dealing with life, which can make us anxious. But if we've got some techniques and strategies that we learn from a young age, then actually we're gonna do okay. We'll be all right.
Yeah, I really like this idea of taking control and being proactive. And I think procrastination is such that it's like the best friend of someone that's suffering with their mental health. It's easier to do anything but deal with the challenge in front of you. So if we can find ways to encourage people to take those small steps and build up that resilience, then it's really going to help them and sort of set them on that path for future life, to be able to deal with, like you say, all these bumps that are coming up in there. So with that in mind, how can we reframe our thinking around negative emotions? Because when we talk about things like anxiety and stress and low mood, the default response almost seems to be to say that these are bad. But how can we use those sort of feelings to our advantage?
Is that for Dom, I think?
Either or. It'd be nice to hear what both of you have got to say on that idea.
I'll go first and then Ben can add. I think, what a lot of people listening will know, but that students and younger people don't always recognize, is that anxiety and excitement are the same emotion from a biological point of view. It's just how we handle it and think about it. So, if we can help students who are dealing with, say, anxiety about a presentation or about something that they've got to do, or people that they've got to meet, new people and those sorts of anxieties, then helpfully reframing it around excitement might be useful, might not, but there are things that we can do to talk to them about that way of thinking. I'll let Ben talk a bit more about how he reframes anxiety as well, but I also like to tackle that mentality or frame of mind where a young person, a student, any age obviously, will say, oh, I'm not that kind of person, I wouldn't wear bright clothes, or I wouldn't try that kind of food, or I wouldn't go there. And it's about tackling that belief about themselves that they can't do it, and actually saying, well, maybe you are that kind of person, you just haven't been yet. And I know that ties into growth mindset, but I really like that tackling and challenging that phrase, that's just not me. I think that's something that, if people were looking to do a campaign around it, for example, as a practical thing, I'm just sort of thinking here, you could have a campaign that would be peer-led, because obviously they're most influenced by their peers, and that was relatively simple and straightforward, that was, the sort of "that's not me" is the kind of thing that we're tackling. And then here are some smaller challenges, obviously building up to bigger ones that Ben's mentioned as well, about how maybe that could be them, maybe they could try new things. So I'm just thinking about how we translate this into a practical thing on campus, but maybe a campaign around the kind of "that's not me" could be quite a visual one and quite a practical one. Over to you, Ben, about reframing though.
Yeah, so I think that's all fantastic what you just said. I think I completely second the way that you're thinking about things. I mean, for me, as I said earlier, I'm very into Stoicism and Stoic philosophy, and perception is such an important part of Stoicism. And they talk about how your mind is so incredibly powerful, and you need to make sure that you're aware of this, because it can lead you in different directions and can take you to dark places. So having some kind of control over the way that you think, or at least trying to challenge your thinking, is really important. And logic and reasoning are the bedrock for Stoic philosophy. So I think actually being able to not believe everything we think and challenge the way that we kind of think about negativity and our situation and environment is incredibly helpful. And there's a real connection between CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and Stoicism, because actually CBT is influenced by Stoicism. So there's this lovely connection, and kind of logic and questioning and reasoning can be used to look at the way that we're thinking about things, because perception is so important. So I think it's just being aware of that, being aware of our internal biases, and I think it's very powerful to challenge them. And I think a lot of the challenges that we do, and especially some of the more quirky ones and embarrassing ones, are actually based around looking at how you're perceiving a situation. And there's a guy called Albert Ellis, who was the founder of rational emotive behavior therapy, and he had these shame attacking exercises that would help his patients to overcome social anxiety. So he would get them to go and do embarrassing things so that they could practice feeling embarrassed and then working through that. And it's kind of challenging that, something that feels negative, but like questioning it and leaning into it. And that's why a lot of the things that we talk about, especially embarrassing things and making yourself feel foolish, is very powerful, and it can help us to reevaluate how we think about negative perceptions.
Yeah, so if we were to sort of look at that idea then of going out and trying new experiences and leaving our comfort zone and building this resilient mindset, and it's all great to say that to students, that this is what you need to do, this is what you should be doing. But in reality, not all young people are obviously going to be comfortable with that or have the confidence to go and do that. Like, I know from my own experience as a parent that fear of failure can almost be overwhelming for a young person. So in that situation, I think it's more a question for Dom, how can we support students so they can actually start to go out there and try these new experiences?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important point that as we get older, we have a little bit more life experience that tells us, what, I did that in the past and I was okay actually in the end, and it was all a bit awkward, but I can do it. Whereas when you're younger, you don't necessarily have the same frame of reference. And so I think here the key is baby steps. So if they're going to challenge themselves, it might be that they sort of think of something that they do every day. Like, do they go on a bike ride? Do they go to a particular place and have the same coffee every day? Do they read the same, newspaper or website or whatever? And just change something there, just change one of their daily activities. So they're in control of it. No one else is sort of making them do it, but they can see that actually, oh, okay, that was all right. I did run a different route, or I did have a different takeaway, and we all do it a bit, but I mean, it's just a small thing. I went out with some friends on Saturday evening, and we were going to someone's house, and they were bringing the food. And I'd said, oh, I'm easy, I'll eat most things, that's fine. And I do eat most things, but they brought me one thing I really don't like. And I sat there going, So I ate what I didn't want to eat, and I was kind of like, well, it was all right. But I just thought, we all have to sometimes just adapt to these things, and of course we can do it, and I knew I'd be fine. But if you're a younger person, and you've maybe moved a long way from home, or you're in a different country from where you normally live, having something that's a bit out of your comfort zone is quite a big challenge. So if they were doing one of your challenges this week with the trigger week of challenges, and I think one of them this week is like paint on your face or draw on your face, a lot of people might just go, whoa, I'm not doing that. Or they might say, oh, okay, I'll just draw like a little flower, or it could be something just quite small, baby steps, and then learn from that experience. Actually, that was okay. I was okay. And obviously those are basic, CBT techniques as well, but they don't need to know that. It's just about trying it out and surviving it.
Yeah, Ben, is there anything that you would add to that?
No, I think that's it. It depends on who you are and what stage you're in. So for some people, they might be quite bold anyway, and they might not actually be in a mental place that they're struggling with. So they can kind of push themselves a little bit, and actually there's a lot to be learnt there. But I think, yeah, it's worth noting. I mean, my journey was very baby steps to begin with. My first challenge was literally to walk to the bench in the local park. So I can relate to people who don't want to do things, but it builds up. And I think what's nice is having guidance and having structure and using these as inspiration, and then kind of customizing stuff. So I always talk a lot about how readers and people I speak to, how they can take these ideas but kind of adapt them to who they are and where they are in their life, and it will apply in so many different ways. So I think it's about seeing how you can use this as an individual, and it's fun to explore it. So yeah, I think there's a whole spectrum, but it's nice to have the ideas in the first place to kind of get the mind thinking about what possibilities there are.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think Dom hit on an important point there, that although this can be linked to lots of different things, that you don't necessarily have to say this is CBT related or this is lived experience related. And what I really like about your challenges is they open up that conversation around mental health without actually directly asking the question. So it makes it a bit more approachable and a bit more relatable to people, that you're not saying, well, if you do this, you'll end up as this. In that you're saying, well, look, try this. It's something just a bit fun. It's a bit silly, and they can go out there and try it and learn that experience for themselves. But how can student services use a strategy like that to engage students on campus? Dom, if you want to go first.
Sure. I mean, the thing about getting students to engage with anything is that it has to feel, relatable to them, of course. Peer influence is the biggest and most persuasive way to get these things done. So any wellbeing teams, wellbeing services could work with the students' union teams and so on, because I think they're going to need to feel that, they're not the only one, other people are doing this, there's going to be a good outcome, there's a reason to do it, that they understand that it will, what the benefits are, that it will build self-belief and self-esteem and confidence, that there's got to be a reason for engaging, whether it's with the challenge week or challenges generally to themselves, getting out of your comfort zone. Why do we do that? And I think there's something really powerful about these activities. I do think they have to be, I'd say co-created, but essentially discussed with the student body and what would be, something that they might engage with, what would appeal, what would be fun, and not just because a lot of them will only do stuff if it'll go on their CV, what can be just for their own benefit. Maybe the benefit is meeting new people, somebody else who's going around with a little flower on their face, and you just think, oh, you did that too, and I just think it's got to feel like it's really positive and worthwhile for them, not in a way where we say, well, we know that this will be good for you, but that it feels like it's a good thing for them to join in with. I think, and that's the same whether you're running a challenge week or if you want to get them talking about their mental health more generally. it's finding ways to do that doesn't feel like you've got a massive label that says mental health, come here, talk about it here. You know, we've talked about this before, is how do we get people to engage when there's still stigma, whatever we want about stigma or think should happen about stigma, it's still there. So maybe we start to think about, you know, I mean, we're all about books, you know, I write books, Ben writes books, you know, maybe we do something like a book club, and that the book club is a well-being book, and that, you know, people read it whichever format they like, and then they come along and, you know, they might discuss it, or they might make suggestions about it. There might be a way to interact around it that that doesn't necessarily involve being in a big room with lots of other people all the time. But I do think, you know, we could look at different ways to get students to engage. That the best way, though, is to talk to the other students. It always comes back to peer influence.
Yeah, why is that peer influence so important for students, or why is it so important that they feel supported in that way?
Well, I mean, we know that from a biology point of view, that the teenage brain changes from being most focused on families and carers when they're younger through the teen years to being most focused on their peers, so other teens and slightly older teens. And, you know, there's lots and lots of science that shows that is their most powerful influencers well into their, you know, mid-late 20s. After that, it tends to sort of even out a bit and might be more their own, you know, their partner, their own children, their own families and so on. But there's a big period of time which derives from millennia ago, when we were all trying to, you know, move from one tribe to the next. It's how you form your new tribe, and that's what they're looking for. They may not call it that, they may not say I'm looking for my tribe, but that's what they're doing. They're looking for their people in life. And so it's biologically driven, and it's one of the reasons the pandemic was so appalling for younger people, because it disrupted their ability to meet people that is, you know, like-minded, their own age and so on. But they're very influenced by each other. So if we want things to be powerful and engaging, we have to be guided by other, you know, their peers, or people, you know, the students who are slightly older than them are really influential. And, you know, me as an elderly person looking after students, I always used to think, you know, they're all a bit of a, you know, they'd say, oh, I'm in the first year or the second year or the third year or whatever. And I think, well, it all looks a bit the same. But of course, you remember back to that time when you were a first year, well, the third year seemed really old, you know, and it makes a big difference. So I guess it's just really important if we can harness that, and it's an innate drive to want to do stuff with your peers, it's going to be useful to us.
Yeah, perfect. And I think, Dom, again, you picked on a really sort of a good idea then of using different strategies, like you gave the example of the book club to try and engage people. But Ben, what would you say are other practical strategies universities can use to try and make mental health more visible?
Yeah, so personally, I think I like the idea of having that structure, having maybe a book or something to work through collectively that is kind of a focus for a term. But I think to get people engaged, I always like the idea of curiosity and things that are novel and that jump out, that kind of disrupt the norm. So I think particular challenges that are slightly quirky will make people just kind of stop. It's not the same kind of standard training and standard kind of challenge thing that people might be used to. When they see something unusual, then that kind of activates that curiosity, and I think that's a great stepping stone for conversations and to kind of take it to another level, and we can, from that point, you can start to explore the literature or books or however you want to play it, depending upon what your university is able to provide. But I think that's why these challenges that we run in this challenge week are quite powerful, because they are very disruptive. The idea of walking a banana in public is, you know, you see someone walking a banana, you're going to start asking questions, and then this is a very powerful tool, and I think that's what can be a great way to kind of explore all of this.
Yeah. Have you got your banana today, Ben?
Of course, yeah. This kind of comes with me all the time. So this particular exercise I'm talking about. So you take a banana and you tie a piece of string to it, and then you drag the banana behind you as if it were a pet, so essentially a pet banana. And you're going to feel very self-conscious, and people will point at you, and you're going to have to work through that. And this exercise was created by Albert Ellis, the man I was mentioning earlier, who created rational emotive behavior therapy, and he loved the Stoics. He was a big fan of the Stoics. So the Stoics they didn't do this banana walk, but they did other things to embarrass themselves. The Roman Stoic Cato would deliberately wear the wrong colors at an important meeting, so everyone would laugh at him and he could practice overcoming that. So something like this gets you thinking. And if you see someone walking down the street with a banana, or even walking around campus, there's a lot of questions, and different vegetables, and there's lots of fun, creative ideas that can come off the back of it. It doesn't have to be a banana, it could be anything, but it's just that kind of disruptive thing. You see something, and naturally the curiosity is going to make you want to engage with it. What's happening? Why are they doing this? And every time something new and unusual happens, then I think that's a powerful way to get people interested in the campaign. And obviously the campaign is a lot bigger than this and a lot broader, and there's a real powerful focus behind it. But I think these quirky challenge ideas and unusual things that people aren't normally expecting to see, that disruption I think can be incredibly powerful.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Ben. So I appreciate the end of this is fast approaching. Is there any questions that the audience have that they'd like to ask either Ben or Dr. Dominic?
Whilst we're waiting, because people take a minute sometimes, don't they, to form their questions. I was just thinking of, what Ben's saying. I mean, it's powerful stuff, but I also think that it will be very challenging for some people to do that. And part of the reason, again, I always come back to biology, is that certainly for the younger teenage brain, 18, 19 years old, we know that when they feel emotions such as shame or embarrassment, they feel it much more strongly than you do as you get older. It's one of those things that is seen on MRI scans. It lights up the brain, and they literally feel it. It's like the reason they get embarrassed about their parents. It's almost painful to them. They don't have any control over that. It is an innate experience and fades, obviously, as you get older. So you might find that the younger ones, it depends how well developed the brains are, but they might be more reluctant to walk a banana. But what it would do is they'd see it and they'd start to focus on it and talk about it, and it would be a talking point. And then they might feel that in a year or two, when they're not the youngest ones there or whatever, they might try it, and I think it's important. I thought I'd just share about the fact that obviously they're not all going to be comfortable with doing that, but it's certainly a talking point, isn't it? It's a hook to kind of get them thinking, what could I do that doesn't make me feel that painfully? We talk about painful embarrassment. That's why it doesn't make me feel that painfully embarrassed. But recognizing that, we can't force people to do stuff or anything like that, of course, but just offering them the opportunity, I think is fantastic. Stuart, I'll stop talking. We've probably got some questions now.
No, let's go. We have had a question come in from Alison. Can you recommend any physical resources or exercise to work through with students to help address the high levels of negative self-talk that they have, and to try and make a more positive view of themselves?
I mean, if we're talking about physical resources, the books, the little student series book that I've written, that I wrote for with Trigger that are for students, for example, the resourcefulness one tackles things like perfectionism and fear of failure, and talks about how people can deal with those in practical ways. So it's things like rethinking, reframing around what's good enough and when it's good enough. So some things might need to be perfect in life, but not everything needs to be, and those sort of CBT techniques, but made very accessible. So that's the resourcefulness book. Yes, somebody's mentioned the Positive Planner. There is a journal created with positive planners, myself and the Samaritans. Again, journaling is a really good way for people to reflect and think about how they felt about something, what they might do differently next time, what worked well. So journaling is a good positive technique. You know, I've done a TEDx talk, which quite a lot of people have watched, because it just summarizes in 10 minutes around the competitiveness and the fear of failure. So those sorts of, it's called What I Learned from 78,000 Consultations with University Students, and it's free on the YouTube. So, you know, those are things. And then Ben, I think, probably has some other very practical resources, because, you know, that's what you do, isn't it, Ben? So I'll just let you share those.
Yeah, so I mean, in a similar style, I think that there are a lot of Stoic exercises that are incredibly pragmatic, and the book that I've written, How to Control the Uncontrollable, is based around 10 Stoic principles, and we explore each one, and then at the end there's a very practical challenge, like 5 different challenges for each principle, where people can actually engage with the idea. And to come back to what Dom was saying about journaling, this is a very important part in Stoicism, and a lot of the Stoics would reflect this self-reflection at the end of the day. And Epictetus, the fantastic Stoic philosopher, has some brilliant advice, and he says at the end of the day we should think about what went well, what went badly, and what's left to be done. And I think this is just a nice way to start reflecting on how things went, rather than just kind of calling it a day. You can look back and try and take some lessons from the day, and this is very powerful, so you can become aware of things that need to change. I think a lot of people who want to make positive change, the first step is being aware that there needs to be a change. So you almost need to raise awareness that actually your internal dialogue is quite negative. Are you aware that this is how you are thinking? So I think being aware of that, starting to think, actually, hang on, I am speaking to myself in such a way that's not helpful. I think that's the first step, and then you can start to look at how we can challenge that thinking and that dialogue. And this connects to CBT. I think is very practical, very powerful as well. So that's kind of my recommendation. I think there's lots to explore within that space.
Perfect, thanks for that, Ben. And again, I think that idea of sort of using the books, what you're saying there, it is really powerful in there. Obviously, not everyone is probably going to have time to go out and sort of read a whole book, and just reading a couple of the other questions that have come in. You know, someone said often our wellbeing activities for students are based around crafts or mindfulness or walking. Are there other activities available? And I think that's one of the strengths of the TriggerHub platform, that we work with all these amazing authors like yourself in there, and we're able to break the content of the books down into more bite-sized chunks. So when you are looking for these other activities, you can go on there, you can find what you need quickly, and you can try lots of different ways and lots of new strategies. And the best thing is, because it's come from sort of the authors, it's all people that, like yourselves, that have been on their own journey, and so they're putting their tried and tested strategies at the heart of everything. So it does make it a really powerful platform for people to be able to go out there and then sort of start plotting their own course to recovery. And someone else has asked if you can talk us through the challenges for this week. Will we receive any resources for them? So we can definitely send those out afterwards. It's like a whole week of challenges. The first one today was to dress outrageously in there, but there's other ones in there, like the banana walk that Ben mentioned earlier. There's the world's weirdest sandwich. There's one on there to write on your face, and there's another one that involves some dancing. Now, we have got all the information on our website in there. It will tell you what the challenge is, what's required to do it, but more importantly, it will tell you why that challenge is important in there, and sort of the impact that it can have, and how that links in to helping students build a mental resilience. So I'll make sure that's sent out to everyone afterwards as well. If you do want to take part, it would be really great. We've got about 7 universities signed up already. And the only thing that we would ask is, if you did do challenges, if you can take pictures of them or a little video, post them on Instagram. There's a hashtag in there, #TriggerChallenge, and then it should really help create a buzz, and again, start getting people involved in talking about mental health, take it outside the therapy room, but make it a bit more visible and a bit more accessible to people. in there. So we are running out of time, so I'll just kind of quickly wrap up. But I think this has been a great discussion today. I'm not going to lie, I did feel really, really uncomfortable at the beginning, being dressed in my monkey onesie. But that feeling, it kind of disappeared really quickly once we got going. And it is making me wonder, actually, how many other times in my life have I felt a moment of discomfort or been a little bit anxious and not done something. And actually what I should have done is pushed myself a little bit more. But for me personally, now I have that mental resilience, and I know I can call on it in the future and use it to my advantage. And that is the power of lived experience and using other people's strategies to help you overcome your own fears or to provide hope to people. You know, Ben's kind of explained about his journey and what he's been through with anxiety, and then I've used his strategy to sort of help me out today in there. And for someone that's a bit more introverted than an extrovert, you know, that's been kind of a pretty big deal for me today in there. But if you do want some more ideas like this and ways to engage students, either drop a comment in the chat now so we can reach out to you, or sort of reach out to us afterwards, and we can arrange to show you Bibliospace and how you can use it across the campus in there. And Bibliospace has been built to really be the ultimate toolkit for mental health, to empower student wellbeing leads and to deal and manage with students' wellbeing holistically. It's got loads of downloadable guides, resources, proactive tips and strategies. And again, it's all delivered through lived experience and bibliotherapy in there. So like I say, if you are interested, drop a comment in the chat now and we'll reach out to you. Likewise, if you do want to connect with myself or any of the authors, in there, again, if you scan the QR codes that are coming up on your screens now, then you can do. And all the questions, another two have popped up right at the end. We will answer those and get back to you later in the week. But other than that, thank you very much for your time. Like I say, it's been a brilliant chat today, and I hope everyone found it useful.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Stuart. That's been brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for your time.